Jon Wellman is the co-founder and CEO of Vokke, a Melbourne software firm building high-assurance AI and software systems for finance, defence and healthcare. He is known for his anti-hype stance on AI, focusing on security, compliance and real production outcomes over flashy demos. Jon has built a team with over 20 staff who help build the software that performs when the stakes are high. A founder, operator and father, he helps serious businesses adopt AI in a safe and practical way. I'm super excited to have this conversation. Let's welcome Jon Wellman.
Thanks, Mel. Excited to be here.
Yay. I'm so excited because I previously had Ange on as a guest as well to this podcast. And then now I'm bringing on yourself because I feel like this AI conversation is just cooking my brain.
Yep.
And I need experts here to kind of give me that no fluff answers and just tell it to us straight, because I've got a lot of people in my audience as well that I think we know it's coming or we know it's here, but we have no idea what to do with it and how to implement it into our business.
Yeah, and there's just so much noise around this at the moment.
Yeah.
You know, even I'm in this space and I'm almost sick of it. It's just like there's just every day, you know, you log onto social media and there's outrageous claims about certain things, and some of it's legit, some of it's real, and there's a lot of value in it. And then there's also, I feel, just noise that's a distraction. So yeah, it's good to have an opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm naturally curious to kind of rewind it back. I have this firm belief that entrepreneurs are circumstantial. They're kind of built by the environment and how they grew up, and then kind of coming into, I don't know, some sort of pain point or a need to become an entrepreneur. So for yourself, I want you to take us back to your upbringing, your parents, what was growing up like? Were you entrepreneurial from the get-go?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel like it's in the family, and it's probably always been something that I've wanted to do. I think from as early as I can remember, I would think about starting businesses and doing different things. That or a marine biologist I wanted to be at one point. So that went, off to one side. But my dad runs a business, my auntie runs a business, a lot of my family runs businesses. So I've kind of grown up around it. And it's just always been part of the dinner table conversation, which is something that now as a dad, my kids are still pretty little, but I'm always trying to already talk to them about those kind of things.
Yeah. And what did your dad do and your auntie?
So my dad was a panel beater and pretty much worked for himself for a very long time. And that was probably a good insight into that type of business and a very physically demanding, brutal job. And then my auntie ran a financial planning practice, which is how I got into that kind of space originally. And then just other people in my family, like my brother runs a bespoke joinery, kitchen cabinetry company. My cousin runs a business. Like pretty much everyone in my family runs businesses. So it's a little bit in the blood, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So just businesses everywhere. And I know a little bit about you. We've spoken offline. Is I think at the age of like 10, you were always already so fascinated about numbers, businesses, efficiency. So tell us, because that's just not what a 10-year-old I find does in their natural habitat.
Yeah.
They're normally out playing, riding bikes. Not me. I don't know how to ride a bike. But yeah, like
I didn't
tell
know
us
that
about
you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. Let's cut to that.
The amount of people that just side quest over here, the amount of people as easy as riding a bike. Every time
and you're
I'm
like, that's really hard actually.
I don't know how to ride a bike.
We'll have to get on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's funny. I found like drawings from when I was like 10 where I was like trying to invent things and, different products I thought that, the world needed, and the ridiculous products, these things that I had at the time. But like I remember being, probably around 10-ish where, how at school, I probably shouldn't say this on camera, but at school you'd have those boxes of chocolates you'd have to go sort of sell door to door, the fundraising types of things. Even like that stuff, like from early primary school, I would mark that up and sell it at a higher price to to make some profit, and then of course ate the profits in chocolates, which, didn't quite put me that far ahead. And things like I would go to the newsagents and buy lollies and then go door to door and try to sell those lollies, at a higher price to make some profit and those kind of things. And I don't know, I've just always been fascinated by business, and I've just probably from being around it with my parents and my family, I guess that's probably what's driven it. But it's sort of what I always knew I would do, even when I didn't know what specific business I would run. I knew there would be a business.
And what was your earliest idea or, I guess, definition of business? Like, did you kind of mentioned as a kid, you'd know the profit and loss. I still feel like even in these day and age, sometimes we forget that a business has to actually profit.
Yeah.
So what was that like? You were like, this is,
Yeah, and I'm sure I didn't think of it in those terms either. I think it just understood that buying it at one price and selling it at a higher price, there was something left over, right? But even then, you're not thinking of it in any sophisticated way. Right? You're not accounting for your labor time. You're not accounting for all of that. Like, it wouldn't have been a good business, right? Obviously, but you're still, I guess, learning the concepts that helped. And that's when, if I fast forward to when I was at university, and so my current business partner, Adrian, super smart guy. We met first day of uni, first class, out the front of a physics lecture. We started talking about Tesla coils or some random geeky thing. And pretty much within like 3 months, we started a business together. And I think for me, it was because I kind of already could recognize the talents that he had. And I could go, okay, that's commercially super valuable. And he was like, what are you talking about? I could just build all these things in games and whatever. He just didn't see like the commercial application of that, which to me was so obvious because it was such an incredible skill that he had and still has. So I think it probably helped build that knowledge, even if I wasn't thinking about it in those, profit and loss P&L terms,
I mean, it's definitely a great skill set to have if you have an innate ability to look at the commercial outcomes of a business. So, okay, uni, what did you study, and what was it always? Well, it was marine biology or
that's what I thought I would do. I did go into science, so I studied. I've got a Bachelor of Science. I studied pure and applied mathematics. Which is how I met Adrian, because he was doing aerospace engineering and we both had units in common, physics and math subjects and those kinds of things, which again, I kind of knew I never planned to use it for a job, which is probably different. And I had a different experience of uni because most people there were very much, right, I do this and then I get a job doing, X. And I was never really there for that. For me, it was just curiosity. Probably an expensive way to satisfy your curiosity, racking up your HECS debt, but you're not really thinking of it like that at the time. But it kind of led to where I am today, which, there's that Steve Jobs quote where he talks about, collecting the dots and then connecting them later. And I think that's been so true in my life so far. It's like just pursuing things that are interesting and fascinating has then led later to something that's been commercially valuable or, provided value in my life.
Yeah. Because I went to uni as well. And when I was in uni, that early 20s, I don't think I was entrepreneurship wasn't really a thing for me in my world, and it's almost like that next natural step. After high school, you go into uni,
that's right,
you go study a bunch of subjects, and then you kind of come out and look for a job. And that's what uni taught me a lot, though. Uni taught me a lot around having my own routine. I think responsibility and accountability is huge.
Because no one's forcing you to do it anymore. No. They're not like, okay, you've got to turn up at this time. Like all of a sudden you're left on your own and you can turn up late, you can skip class, you can do all these things, and you've got to find the discipline, right, and the structure in your own life, which is like really hard. And I think a lot of people struggled in that transition in that first year of uni. Yeah.
And okay, so uni, you're studying there, you're doing sciences. You mentioned you went into business after 3 months with Adrian, but was that Vokke or was that another business that you guys started?
Yes, that was beforehand.
Okay,
so
cool.
Basically, I mean, look, that first year we were sort of tinkering with different things, but eventually what we landed on was this social network that we were building. So I don't know if you know like Medium and Substack and those kind of products. So we were basically building that back then, which was probably a little bit ahead of its time. And we got to a pretty good point with it, actually. It probably got to around 1,000 users that were using it quite actively. They really loved it. We dedicated so much of our time to this. We'd originally been doing it part-time in the evenings, not really making a lot of progress. And then we hit a point where we realized, and this was a good life lesson, you have to kind of go all in. So we deferred uni, we quit our jobs, we raised some capital. We all moved into a share house together. There was like 5 of us doing it. And we just did nothing but that for about a year or a little bit longer. And it was a fantastic experience, and it taught us how to build products like software in a way that we just would have taken 5 years to do like in a traditional path. So it was such an incredible learning experience. But that type of business, and this taught me an important lesson about business models, not all businesses are created equal, right? Some business models are harder than others. And that's a business model that, if it works, is phenomenal. Some of the best businesses in the world are companies like Facebook. But at a small scale, they're horrible businesses, right? You really need a lot of scale for them to work. And because we just couldn't get to that next level, we didn't have revenue from advertising, and it wasn't growing fast enough to necessarily justify the next round of investment. So eventually we had to close the doors on it, which was an incredibly painful time and one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made up until that point. But, ultimately then kind of led to what we do now, which is Vokke, because we finished that. We had a lot of inquiries from people who'd seen the product and they loved it. And they said, oh, can you build our thing? And at the time, we're like, no, we're going to be billionaires, guys. Come on, we're not going to build your product, And then obviously when it didn't fully work out, we were like, so, you still need some help?
Now. Yeah.
And we kind of learned what we were good at, which was the software side of things, building product, not so good at marketing, not so good at like distribution, but really good at understanding an idea and building software around it and that whole kind of process. And that really then became the genesis of building Vokke, which is an agency building software for other people.
Oh my God, that's fascinating. That is so fascinating. Okay, I want to stay there for a little bit because the story that you just shared really gave me, like, I had the Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, doing their, going all in their garage, or like Facebook, building and having that frat house, and it's like all that. So when you look back at that time where you really are going all in, you're eating noodles, you're with the boys or the crew, give me like core memories of that. Is it as nostalgic as it kind of feels? Were they some of the best days of your life, the grind, and you've got nothing to lose?
Basically, yeah. I mean, there were incredible memories, and I remember early on, before we'd really all got into that one house, we were working from our garage, literally like that kind of thing, where it was freezing in winter and, just all those kind of things. But it was like the best time ever. It was so much fun. And I think the freedom to create your own products or whatever you want in the world there's nothing like it. And that's obviously one of the reasons I've been drawn to business, because you're in charge of your own destiny. And that doesn't mean you'll succeed. Like, that venture didn't succeed, right? You might be in charge and lead yourself off a cliff, but at least you're in charge.
And you die on your own sword.
Exactly.
That's something I've always said.
100%. And I think you've got the opportunity to do something about it, right? Which is something I struggled with, I think, more when I was employed. And that's probably why I was never the best employee, where, okay, there's a very structured, fixed way to do things. And if I wanted to change it, so I want to know that's not the process. So, whereas today, I can change things every day if I want, if I think it's going to get a better outcome. But those days were amazing. Hard work, really hard work. You're working the 100+ hour weeks and doing all this kind of stuff. But it was phenomenal. And we just learned so much about, business and software and everything that we know today. So it didn't work out like Steve Jobs business? And it was, but
you got 1,000 members, that was pretty good.
Good start, yeah.
So that was your very first business, right?
I'd say it was probably the first proper business. Okay, well, there's been lots of little things before that, little things we tried. We had at one, I posted about, I saw there was a trend a little while back where people were talking about all the failed ventures before the one that succeeded. And I thought, I'll write one. And I could only think of one or two. And as I was writing it, I was realizing how many things there were. Like, at one point, we bought like a big box of Wayfarers Sunnies that we thought we could do like a drop shipping thing with. And then another time we bought these like teddy bears. We thought we could sell them for graduation, things. Or like, there was so many things that were just like these half-assed ideas that never went anywhere. And again, we were just doing too many things, and you learn a lot about staying focused is a big lesson in business, right? Can't do everything. So there's been a lot of, things like that, but luckily none of them were really, we've never really, other than that, probably that social network, really bet the farm. And that's probably our conservative nature, that we always want to be pushing things forward and trying new things, but we never want to risk everything to do it. It's very in our nature to kind of preserve and protect at the same time. So worst case, we end up with a box of teddy bears and
they're still there, aren't they? With
they're somewhere. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, I love it. And it sounds like, so then that venture didn't work, but you did mention that it's one of the most painful things. So what did you learn about having to let that go? And also the investor side of thing, that's something that I've always been quite fascinated about, having to let everyone else down.
Yeah, gut-wrenching.
Right?
Absolutely gut-wrenching. And it's funny, even in that, so when I first finished school, started financial planning, I ended up saving up some money, and I built a house down in Druin. I moved all the way down regional so I could like maximize first homeowners grant and all this kind of stuff. Ended up selling that house, and I put a fair bit of my own money into this venture. So I was also, not just a sweat equity, founder, but also I had like money, skin in the game from that perspective. So I'd done that. The investors had come on board. Shutting it down was it was so hard because there's never any certainty, right? Like you always are holding on to this hope in that kind of startup that tomorrow it could be, you could be just there. Like that, that cheesy meme where you see the person the diamond thing, right? Like 100%. They're digging towards it and one person turned around and one didn't. And you will never know, right? And if we look at that business, the concept actually was correct, right? It was on point, because our original thesis was you had these internet forums where people talked about maths and physics and all these things, but they were like locked away in like these 90s style 2000s bulletin board things. Then you had platforms like Reddit where people discussed things, but it was such a geeky interface that no one really wanted to even admit they used it. Do you know what I mean? And then on the other side, you had Facebook, which everyone loved to use, was really cool, but a lot of the conversations were a bit vapid and, from our perspective, it was fully social focused. There was nowhere really online to have any kind of meaningful discourse, right? Mm-hmm. That was sort of the problem that we saw. And that turned out to be correct, right? Like that's a massive thing now if you think of like podcasting and Substack and all these things. So the trend was right, but the execution was wrong. And that was hard to admit because at the time we thought, the idea is no good. You look back and realize, no, actually we didn't pull it off, right? And if you look at Medium, which ended up doing it really well, it was founded by Jack Dorsey, who founded Twitter, right? So other people who had a lot of capital and knew what they were doing ended up executing on the concept. So I think, it's hard because you never really know. There's never a point where you go, yeah, this is 100% not going to work, so let's shut it down. You're always left with a lot of uncertainty, many days walking around, the park and with coffees and talking and trying to debate, should we continue, do we stop? And I think it's a hard question for anyone in business. It's like, when do you admit it's not working? There's never a clear line on that. So it was really hard. And we went so far with the investors that not only, when we did end up shutting it down, we then ended up continuing to work on contracting stuff to save up money to pay them back a portion of it, even though legally there was no reason to do any of that, just because we felt so bad that, and you see other startup founders burning capital, not even thinking about it, right? But I think that's just ethics in business at the end of the day.
And at the end of the day, it's also understanding that the investors are placing their bets and knowing that in their portfolio, not every one of them is going to turn into the Facebook and the Twitter and the Ubers of the world.
Yeah.
So it's also having their accountability.
That maturity, And it's part of the mistake that we made too, because we'd raised it through a lot of family and friends and things like that. They probably weren't, there was no big portfolio. So it did feel a lot more personal in that way. Whereas, as you said, if you go to some, VC firm or something like that, or incubator, they know that. They know that, a certain percentage will, and a large percentage won't do very well. And then a very small percentage, via power laws will do very, very well and they, return the fund, right?
It is a lot harder when you're then having barbecues with them on the weekend and going, damn it.
So it was a tough time for sure, but we learned a lot.
And do you think, because you don't strike me as someone that has an ego per se, you might have worked on it. Well, at least at the time that I'm meeting you now, definitely not. But would you say that a lot of that, did ego play a part in that, like letting go, failure, or like did you have the self-awareness and discernment?
Yeah, well, I think I probably went into it with a lot more ego and a lot more kind of arrogance, thinking, because we were 21, you kind of assume you can't fail. Like you're not thinking about risk in the same way. So you're very optimistic about everything. So then when it didn't work out, it probably did shatter the ego a lot and then gave me a lot more of a humble view of, okay, the world is not that easy. It's actually quite hard to build a successful business. And, over the however many years it's been since then, it's been a more gradual climb. And we probably, you can overreact to a lesson too. And I think we then went the opposite way where we didn't take any risk, and that slowed us down a lot in our growth because we were so like, we can't risk anything. We have to build very incrementally, and that's held us back as well. So like anything, you can, as a pendulum, you can swing too far the other way, and you've got to find that right middle ground. And I think we're getting there, probably still too conservative, but at the end of the day, I've got more comfort that we'll still be here in 10 years than other business owners who might take a lot of risk, and it might mean they end up in a much better position, but also there's a higher chance they will end up losing all of it. And everyone's got to strike that balance themselves, I think.
I love this conversation. It's so good because the risk adversity as well, like how your past experiences can obviously taint or potentially impact your future steps. And like you mentioned, you can maybe go, oh, we failed, quote unquote, that once. we don't want to do things again, but you actually got to shoot another shot, or you got to take another chance.
And I think that's an important thing about limiting your downside as well, that, you know, any investment we make now, we're always doing it in a way where if it doesn't work, it's okay. Like, it can't be bet the farm. That's why I would struggle so much if you opened a restaurant or something like that, because a lot of people do, they'll save up for a long time, put an enormous amount of money into this one venture. And if it doesn't work, and there's a high chance it won't work, they can't just have another go. You know, like, that might be the shot that they had. And that's kind of terrifying, you know, for me. Whereas I think that's what's good about professional services, you know, agencies like your own, where, okay, you try something, doesn't work, you try something else, you know, you're never really putting everything on the line to make it work. At least, you know, if you're being prudent about it. So I think you just want to always fight to live another day, because we've got a long career ahead of us, right? Like, you don't have to risk it all. And you probably realize as well as you go along, you don't have to try to be a billionaire or something ridiculous. You know, like, there's much more reasonable levels of success to aim for that you can gradually climb towards. Yeah. So, and that's probably just maturity and age, you know, getting old now.
Well, for someone listening to this and then kind of like, they're probably not even thinking about some of the things you've highlighted. So already I know that it's super insightful and valuable. For someone listening to this that is sitting on the fence about whether to start, and then they hear kind of like, you didn't make your first business didn't turn into Facebook, and they're sitting in that kind of fear and deliberation still of, do I start, do I not? Maybe they've just come out of uni. What do you have to say to them when they do have this creative vision of working for themselves or being entrepreneurial, but they're just so bounded by that first step?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's like a helpful mental model to think about the fact that we're all probably going to have a certain number of failures before we have a big success. So you might as well just get them out of the way. You know, I think the faster you can try stuff, and if it doesn't work, you can learn from it and move on. Because for the amount of time you spend trying to read textbooks and blog posts, like, and you think you're learning, it's actually a really bad form of procrastination, that you think you're doing something. You're not actually doing anything. You're just reading, and your brain's absorbing some information that you're probably going to forget anyway, if we're honest. So I think the only real learning is action. You actually have to do something, and then you'll learn from the real world's feedback if you're on the right track or not. You know, you've got an idea, you want to put a new product in the market. Do people buy it or do they not? And then you'll learn something real, and then you actually really internalize the lesson too, because it cost you something, right? And then you move on to the next thing. So look, it's hard, and I think it's always a good thing if people can go into a venture with some kind of safety net, so that they're not, you know, I think we probably made some mistakes because we were so all in, and that can lead you astray in other ways, where you can't be as calm and measured about your thinking. But I think you just have to just do it, you know, and the younger you are, like for me, I'd started at first business, like proper business, you know, let's say it was about 20, 21. Like, if it all failed, like, so what? Time. You know? Yeah. And the story I always told myself, which maybe is helpful for someone thinking about starting now, is that worst case, I'm more employable, because I tried something, I did all the things. I learned how to do HR and finance and all this stuff that makes you a better operator. If I don't do it for myself, like, surely that's more valuable to some other employer. Like, I would love to hire someone like that had tried that, didn't work, decided they want to work for someone else, but they've learned all these skills.
Love it.
So I think if your worst case is you've learned something that furthers your career, then what's there to lose? I
feel like the more that I've been in entrepreneurship, the less employable I'm becoming.
Yeah, someone did tell me that the other day. They're like, actually, I would never hire you, given like you could never, do that anymore.
I'm just way too out there. I question everything. I say why to every single thing, every system. I try to look for a loophole or break. So
there's probably a crossover point where if you've done it for too long, you're not employable. But I think that first, like, if you'd spent 1 or 2 years doing it, I think that's more employable. And then maybe, there's a point it starts to flip, because I agree. Yeah. I don't know how employable I would be. I wasn't that employable back then. So,
Yeah, I love it. I'd love to take the conversation now to Vokke, because this is your current business and entity. And I think it's providing so much value, like we mentioned, in a space where it is confusing. So in your own sort of blatant layman terms, what is Vokke? What does it stand for? What does it do? What is the purpose of it?
Yeah, sure. So basically it's a technology consultancy, right? So there's kind of 3 streams of work that we do. One's advisory. So we're going to businesses and helping, whether it be training, reviewing their tech stack and auditing it, their processes, it's all that kind of stuff. The middle is implementation. So someone's got an idea, they want to launch a new product to market, or they've got, their business is growing, but they're drowning in spreadsheets and Word documents and all this kind of stuff, and they need software built. So we'll actually go through.
Me speaking offline, looking at Omar, who's also in it, going, I think we need Vokke.
Well,
anyone else can relate as soon as he said spreadsheets and Word docs.
Well, the thing is, you've got there's some industries that they're a really well-trodden path, right? Like if you look at an accounting practice, right? And I'm not saying accounting is easy by any means, but it is kind of standardized. If you go from one accounting practice to the next, there are kind of standardized, practices. And that's why you can have, it's a common strategy for accountants to grow is to buy the practices because you can grab one and just roll it in. Whereas if you look at your business, you wouldn't just go buy like another media business and try to roll it in. Like you're like, yes, we do the same thing, quote unquote, but everything would be so different in the way you do things. It would be a nightmare trying to bring it in. Same as us. I've got no interest in buying another software consultancy firm. They'd be too different. So that we don't have the same kind of standardizations from one to the next. So what that means is that an accounting firm that's more standardized ends up with really good software and they all use the same kind of software and they've got really standard processes and companies come along and build software for that and they can charge, $100 a month to 1,000 companies and that works. But for lots of industries, that's not the case. They're so different. They can't find any software that actually solves their problem. So they do end up sticky taping together lots of different solutions or they run out of spreadsheets and Word docs because that's the best, next best thing. So a lot of the time we'll go in, we'll understand those problems and we'll design and build software to solve that. So then the whole company pretty much runs off the software that we've built. So it can be software that they're commercializing, as in they're charging customers to use it, or it can be more internal, but effectively we're building software. And then the third arm is infrastructure, which is where we're doing, hosting and that kind of infrastructure management. And software is all an AI, and advisory is a lot of AI stuff now. It's obviously very topical, which we can talk more about. But that's really kind of the three forms of what we do.
I say like the work we kind of do in my events and marketing agency is like the pretty stuff. And then yours is the really essential stuff that is like the foundation,
the
the
ugly
structure.
stuff in it,
But the not so sexy stuff, right? People go, oh my God, you're in events. And it's like, there is a level of like with marketing, it's the how people find you. So it's your external. And whereas
so important.
with it, but equally important is your tech stack, your software, and that plug and play or like building, using Asana for this and then Slack for that and like WhatsApp for this other chat and like all these different things. It is so hard to systemize and to bring things on to make it more efficient. And I think that's really what you are able to do is by being able to look at it all in a larger landscape or with a bird's eye view and go, okay, this is what you need to do and this is how you need to build it to make it more efficient for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's definitely not like the sexy stuff, but I love it. And I think this is why it's great that there's niches and different people love different things. Because for me, it's fascinating seeing all of like how, and these are businesses that I never thought I'd have exposure to. Like we work with clients who do, waste management and things like that, where you go like, I never would have dreamed I'd be doing, be in that world. But when you get into it and you realize how it all works, it's fascinating. So we get to see how industries work. And I love that because I'm just a curious person, I guess. So being able to then take that and come up with, okay, these are the systems and this is the software, we really enjoy it. And I think that's probably where as an agency we've been quite strong because most people who go into software development, they're more on the, okay, they're doing really pretty designs and really beautiful consumer-facing stuff, which they're really, really good at that. And we do some consumer work, but like a lot of our stuff is B2B or internal systems. It still looks good, but we're not like trying to win a design award or something like that. We're trying to get results and we're trying to make sure it's reliable and it can't fail and it's secure and just different concerns. And that's where there's been a little bit more of a niche in that because most they're not attracted to that, right? They are attracted to the working with startups and doing the really creative, what they call creative.
But this is critical
stuff,
and also makes businesses, I think I read somewhere or we spoke somewhere that like overall you're managing up to $1 billion
across clients.
Across all your clients.
It's
not an easy feat, you know?
That's right. Yeah. It's, and we take that responsibility really seriously, right? Because these businesses rely on us and sometimes we're building software that just manages a really small part of the process, but more often it's the whole business, right? And it often starts with one thing. They might say, oh, we need a way to, have customers book through a portal or something like that. And you go, okay, great, let's do that. But it's very natural then to say, okay, well, if they've booked, like kind of what happens next, right? And then what happens after that? And then before you know it, the whole business is running on software and it makes sense to keep investing because they keep getting a good return on that investment. But it does create, as you said, a lot of responsibility because the whole company is running on these systems. But that kind of drives us to make sure then that we're making sure it is secure, that we're making sure that it's reliable, that it doesn't fall over, and all of these things that are important to us. And it's nice that they're needed and they're valuable to the clients that we work with.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes we work with startups, and I love startups because we've done it before, but they don't care about the same things. And they kind of want to skip some of that stuff. Whereas it's really nice working with, more mature businesses as well that understand the value of, okay, if it goes offline, how quickly can we get it back online? Those kinds of things.
The efficiency of it. So I was at a Club of United Business, a mutual entrepreneurship group that we're connected in. And we had our core session where we were masterminding, and the gentleman next to me actually said that software is dead. Okay.
Yep.
Software companies are dead, and it is all now AI.
Okay.
What do you have to say to that kind of comment?
You're trying to fire me up here, Mel. I mean, it depends how you want to define software and software companies. So I think the first thing is that we're entering into an era where there will be a massive proliferation of software. There's no doubt about that. It's going to be an explosion of software products. Who builds them and how they're managed, that's the discussion, right? But I definitely don't think software is dead in the sense that we're not going to use it. There's going to be so much of it. But there's a real question here around who's going to build it. And I think there's a difference between what's happening today and where maybe things will be in the future with AI. So if we rewind a little bit, and I think this is important to say, 6 to 12 months ago, right? AI could write software, and honestly, not very well, not very good. It would produce a lot of lines of code, it could spit out thousands of lines of code, and it would functionally look like it was working. But if you knew what you were doing and you looked under the hood, it was just, a dumpster fire, basically. But at that time, you still had a ton of, LinkedIn influencers and stuff saying, oh, I'm now 10x productivity and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, it really wasn't true. It might look like it's 10 times as fast, but what does that matter if you're producing garbage, right? So that's where we were. Things have changed recently. So over the last couple of months in particular, especially around December, AI has kind of improved again further, as well as the tools that we use to engage with those, large language models. So rather than going straight to ChatGPT, we would use a tool like Claude Code is a big one. Where it's the large language model underneath it, but also there's almost software that's wrapped around it that lets you work with it a little bit better, right? So combine all those things together, it's now producing much better results. Still, if you don't really know how to harness it, it can still do all sorts of weird stuff that's quite risky if people don't know what they're doing. But definitely if people are proficient software developers, they can use these tools to produce code a lot faster. So look, I don't know. I mean, the long term, if the AI stuff gets so good that it's literally flawless, no matter what you ask, it makes it perfect and flawless and all this kind of stuff.
I feel like it's getting there, John. I do. My partner's in event tech, and his co-founder it's like they're building this multi-million already, but billion-dollar company. And and they're like, who's your product developer? And they're like, Claude.
Yeah.
But you have to know what to do.
Yeah.
But I guess things are just moving at such a rapid, phenomenal rate. And the ability from startup land is a client has a customer issue with the, event tech needing an OTP or something with their Hotmail domains and things. And we just had a chat with Claude straight away, and it was like these bugs were fixed in real time while these events were running. We were troubleshooting things.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing.
I was fascinated because if you traditional ticketing platforms, not going to name names, but the giants that we all know, you would need 3 to 5 business days to contact customers.
It changes it completely.
Exactly.
But then the flip side of it is I would then think, well, why were those bugs happening on a live event? There's a whole process around how to do this stuff. And I think there's a bit of a misconception in software development that development is everything, whereas really it's only ever been, at most half of the process. Really the full process is you've got to, are we even working on the right thing, and how do we prioritize that? Is this actually going to matter? Yeah. And then what's it going to look like? How's it going to function? Defining all of that. Then you're building it, then you're testing it, then you're deploying it. There's all this stuff. And so software development, the coding part's getting faster. What we'll see over time is all those bits will get faster, and therefore the whole process can get faster. So it's absolutely happening. But the question is, at least for me today, is that someone who knows what they're doing using those tools will still outperform someone who doesn't.
Yes.
I met with someone the other day who'd vibe coded. That's the term for it, right? Vibe coding, where you're just kind of prompting and it's building stuff. It's a little bit derogatory, I guess, but that's what it's called. It's taken up in the industry now. So someone the other day had vibe coded this platform that they were actually, it was live and they were selling it to customers and people were actually paying for it. And some VC firm had offered them like $5 million to invest in it, like, successful. And the lead, dev on this thing, I was talking with him and I was just asking questions. I'm fascinated by this at the moment too. And obviously this is both an opportunity for our business and a threat. So I'm not going to ignore, what's happening here. So asking him questions and I said, oh, by the way, like what languages is it written in, right? Really basic question. And he said, oh, just like, the main ones. You go, okay, like, which main ones? And you go, oh, just like, the main ones. And I realized that he doesn't even know what language this thing is built in. He knows nothing about what's happening underneath this. And then I said, for example, in terms of the hosting, like where is it hosted? He didn't know. I said, what are you going to do if a server dies? And he's like, wait, that can happen? It's like, yes, that can happen. Like it's such a low level of understanding that it's so dangerous, because there's real customers using this with real data and their businesses are now relying on it. So you could end up with 100 companies relying on this software where they don't fundamentally understand it at all. Yeah. And that might be fine. Maybe it all works out, but I think there's a much higher chance there's a lot of problems there. So to me, there's still a real need for a blended approach where you work with people who are experts at it. They use those tools, no different than, we're having this conversation today. I'm sure you'll use AI in the process to, get to the output. That might be cutting up, reels. It could be taking a transcript, creating posts, like AI in the process. But you're going to get a better outcome out of that than I would if I did it by myself. Yeah. So that's where I think we are today. Who knows, in 10 years, things will change and we'll have to keep adapting. But at least today, I think that's important.
Because I think I agree. It's like, obviously we're all using it. It's important that we are using it. But what's the strategic thinking? Because that's the real thing, right? Not the tools itself, but the actual thinking behind it is still very important.
And I think the thing that's scary to me is that you can't necessarily tell the difference about quality in the short term. So I was talking to the financial advisor about this the other day and said, let's say he came up with a strategy for you, right? And said, okay, this is the strategy that you're going to follow over the next 10 years. And then, I came along and I'm not as qualified and I don't know this stuff and I come up with a strategy as well. If you implement those two strategies side by side, a week later, you won't be able to tell the difference because there's not enough time. But if you were to look at that over 10 years, I guarantee that you'll be in a better position if you'd followed his advice than mine. And that kind of worries me and scares me because we haven't let this experiment run long enough yet to see the results of this.
Early.
And everyone's kind of already claiming how successful this stuff is going when it's so early. Like we haven't seen the result of purely AI generated content over time or purely AI generated code over time. And maybe that will be great, but also maybe it's a much worse outcome. And that's certainly true in software where the quality matters over time. Like you're not necessarily going to see that straight away, but it'll happen when you're adding that 10th thing. And now every time you add one feature, it breaks something else. You don't see that stuff straight away. So I think there will be an issue over time. Unless AI gets, so good so fast that it can solve that for us, I guess.
And I think the thing is, the reality is none of us really know how fast it's moving, what they are. We can make predictions and hypotheses, but we won't know. Yeah. So this gives me a good insight and also a natural flow into, I feel like what Vokke does differently is you have a bunch of certifications. Like you're super registered in all these different bodies. Can you tell me a bit about that? Because I think that's something that people don't recognize or don't realize with software development.
Yep. Yeah, sure. And I think sort of the meta of that as well is that if you mentioned there that no one really knows what the future holds and completely agree with that. So I think what you have to do as a business owner is think about, well, what things can I invest in that will be valuable regardless of what happens, right? So to your point, investing in strategic thinking, investing in your brand, investing in relationships, like they're all things that are going to pay off over time no matter what happens here. So to me, that makes a lot more sense to invest in those things than other things that maybe are redundant in 3 months' time because technology did, a certain thing. Yes. So the certifications that's part of that, right? So software is a funny world where there's not much regulation. So you look at a lot of industries, you look at financial services, you look at law. There's so much regulation. There's so many strict ways they have to operate. And that's not true of software at all. We've got certain legislation. It's pretty it's not that prescriptive. Yet software runs the world. Literally everything runs on software and it's almost entirely unregulated, which is crazy when you think about it. So it's the absolute Wild West. It's the infrastructure we rely on that doesn't have that strict governance around it. So one of the certifications we have is ISO 9001 and 27001, which is basically quality and information security. It's an international standard. It's quite a difficult process to get it. And effectively what it means is that we follow some really strict processes that are internationally recognized. And then also we get audited every year voluntarily, right? So we subject ourselves to an independent audit every year to come through our business and look at all these things and make sure that things are looking good and that we're doing all the things that we say that we're doing. So it's really important. It helps us, but it really helps our clients understand that, okay, there's a process here. They're following the process. If they weren't following the process, they would lose their certifications. So it just gives that extra assurance in a world where you can't lean on regulation to know that. Whereas you go to a doctor, you kind of know that there's going to be a certain level they have to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's not true in our world. And that's why, unfortunately, people get burnt all the time. Everybody knows a story of someone who's tried to build some software and they've just lost so much money and burnt it to the ground and like going to a mechanic and getting ripped off or something. So for us, it means investing a lot in the things that improve our, the sort of trustworthiness and, and assurance and those kind of things.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. That extra layer of trust and just having those icons and logos. You wouldn't pay for something on a website that doesn't have those secure payment gateways. So it's the same as the software. Yeah.
And it's almost the harder it is to get, the more valuable it is, right? And it's kind of like the the peacock's tail, if you're familiar with that evolutionary biology. It's like, it's actually it's a really high cost to a peacock to have the really big, plumage, and that's actually why it's a sign that it must be really healthy, right?
Okay.
So it's the same kind of concept where it's like it's really difficult to get these things, and that's why that they're valuable. Because if you could press a button and get one, then no one would value it at all. So it's painful at times to have this much compliance as a small business, right? Yeah. We're only 20 odd staff, so having probably higher compliance than companies 10 times our size can be hard at times, but overall it's worth it.
Yeah, I love it. I want to swing the conversation around to family, because I think it's quite important to obviously hear these authentic stories on this show about business. It's naturally an entrepreneurial kind of show, but not without all the other buckets of life is what I kind of like to blend in. And so has fatherhood changed you? How have you learned to balance the two, running a big team? And this is probably just a selfish question because I want to know, as me and my partner look to plan and start a family, and we're both entrepreneurs, and I'm just like,
that's tricky.
The more that I can ask people, the better insight that I can have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it's the most profound life-changing moment, I think, of someone's life. So it definitely changed a lot of things, and it gave a lot more meaning to the work that I was doing as well. Like, you feel a lot more like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm building something for the family. Like it felt less about being, for me or just for me and my partner. Like it just have a different feeling to it, which is hard to describe. I guess more practically, it meant I had to get much better at managing my time and fitting things in. So I've always wanted to be a very present dad. I'm not one of these people that, no one really probably wants to be out there working ridiculous hours and not seeing their kids. But for me, it was a non-negotiable that I was involved. So when my first son was born, I took 3 months off work and stayed home. I was up every night doing all the things. Like, I've been so involved with everything throughout every stage of life for our kids. And I've really capped it out, right? I work 40 hours a week and that's all I do. Like, I don't do more than that. And if that means we don't grow as a result, then so be it,
Wow.
And to me, that's, Adrian, my business partner, I'm sure would love it if I, worked more on all these things. But funnily enough, since my son was born, which was 5 years ago, we've grown tremendously through that time. And I think it's just taught me a lot about, those constraints. Any parent will say when they have kids, they look back and they go, what did I do with all the time? Like, they're just like, how did I have so much time and I just squandered it? And you just get better and better at compressing it. So yeah, I kind of limit my time and I say, well, that's all I've got. And the rest of it is family time. I wake up, it's family until work. And then as soon as I'm finished, it's family until, late at night. And that's every day, and it can be relentless. But you're just cramming as much as you can into the workday, and overall, I get way more done now than I ever did pre-kids. So you kind of figure it out. But it's a tough balance, And I think for me, being an entrepreneur and a dad it's kind of like constantly feeling like you're not doing any of them well enough, because all of them feel like they could take so much more of your time. You still wouldn't be, what a business is like. You could double your hours and you still wouldn't feel like it's enough. It's the same with parenting, right? There's always more you want to do. So you're constantly pulled in different directions. So I won't pretend I've got like the perfect, mental balance, but I give them all what I can.
But the way that you've upheld boundaries, because I think, and is that just the promise that you switched in with yourself? Because that sounds really lovely. I already kind of feel like I've said that about my personal life now, and then when work comes in, my gym's the first to go, it's difficult. It's difficult, especially hard when you're like, this is a competing priority and this has to take priority. So have you been able to, I guess, like actually just honor what your non-negotiable was, and that's just a mindset switch?
Yeah, I think for me it was with the kids. It's funny you say that because I agree. I've let myself down many times, as in I don't, work and not go to the gym, or I'll do these things, and often you put yourself at the bottom. And I think which is even harder with like fatherhood, that it kind of goes, your kids, your wife, your business, and then you feel like you're just like the last at the bottom. And that's nothing that they're doing. That's like a mental thing that you're sort of doing yourself, I guess. But it's just, I don't know. I think for me, it was easy in a sense that when they came along, it was just like, it's so important that I got to fill this first, and then what's left over goes to the other things, not the other way around. But it hasn't resulted in like a worse business or anything like that. It's resulted in a better business. Like we've grown so much. And I learned a good lesson in this actually with the first time I took time off from the business. So for the first 5 years, barely took a day off, right, as is pretty common. And then we had this trip to South America booked, and it was 5 weeks. So by far the longest I'd ever taken off from the business. And then what I did was I worked night and day before we left to get everything ready. And it forced me to, stop doing certain processes. I delegated, I automated, I did all the things, and then went away for the 5 weeks. It was completely fine. And then when we got back, I still didn't have those tasks to do because I delegated them, I'd automated them, or I got rid of them, right? So all of a sudden I had all this extra time that I put into sales, and then we grew. So me leaving then led to a lot of growth. And it was exactly the same thing when my son was born. To take that 3 months off, I had to again figure that out. To go, okay, well, we're now at a new level. How do I now, automate, delegate, do all this kind of stuff? And then same thing happened. It was fine while I was away, and then we grew as a result. So it's kind of for me been the constraint that I've needed, because otherwise I'm the kind of person who just tends to try to do it myself just carry like everything. Yeah. Whereas being forced to be like, right, you have to sort this out. You cannot do it because you're off for 3 months. There is no choice but to lean on other people or lean on software, or get brutal about, okay, do we even need to be doing that process in the first place? And that's really led to a lot of growth in our business. So yeah, I don't know. For me, it's probably, we might be further ahead because we had kids. You know?
I love it. I think it's a really hopeful perspective as well. And I'm hearing that I need to go to South America again. And I'll do that for 5 weeks. Right? Yeah, exactly. And we'll do that. No, that's really, really awesome. And I think a lot of people are going to get value, because I know that just helps me kind of go, you know what, you're going to be okay, Mel. You'll just do the work that's needed to be done. Your life, yes, absolutely will change without a doubt. But I think we're going to be really good. Look, it's tiring and it's exhausting, and you're often left feeling like you don't have a lot of energy left, but it's so rewarding and so worth it. And I think business is like that, right? Like if you just looked at, for the average business owner, the amount of hours they put in and the money they make, it's probably a pretty bad job for a lot of people, right? Some, don't get me wrong, it works out really, really well. For a lot of people, that's, it's not necessarily worth the hourly rate. Exactly. But still, you've asked them, they wouldn't trade it, because there's a level of meaning that comes from this. Like, I created this, I actually, out of nothing, right? This didn't exist. And through your sheer power of will and ideas and wrangling people and making things happen, you created something. And I think that's so much meaning in that. And I think, parenting's similar. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Jon, you've been incredible. This conversation has been so insightful. I've got a couple things that I just want to get out of you before we finish up. The first one is, what else is in store for Vokke? I guess from a 2026 roadmap, what are the exciting things that are going to happen for you and the business?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously AI is the talk of the day, and it's something that we've been involved in for a long time, but it's even now that the capabilities have got so good in the last couple of months, it's really becoming the sort of bedrock of everything that we do. So that's both internal, as in everything we do, we're re-looking at and rethinking how that works in the world of AI. And the way I work every day now is not even recognizable to a year ago. Like, you're just talking to agents and they're doing work and they're coming back and they're pulling data from this thing to that thing, and it's wild. So we're really just reimagining and rethinking the whole way that work gets done. And it's crazy to throw everything, up in the air like that again, while still maintaining, quality, security, all these things that we have to maintain. And then the flip side of that is, as we learn and we can learn for ourselves, we can then teach our clients, right? So we can go into their businesses, help them build those agents and use existing tools and level up the way that they work in this new world. So that's really the big shift and the big focus for the year, because it's just so much happening that I think a lot of people need that, navigation, assistance, and we're in a good position to help.
Yeah, love it. And Jon, lastly, this podcast is called The Authentic Me Show.
Okay.
So I would love to know what your definition of authenticity is, how you've been able to maintain that just this whole way through. So I'm really, really grateful for this conversation.
Yeah, okay. That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that before. I don't know. I think for me, I've always been a very long-term oriented person. Like I've never been the kind of person that's like trying to make things, like a quick buck in the short term, right? So, and that's often cost me in the short term because I tell the honest truth even when it's going to hurt us. But over the time, it builds really strong relationships. So I think for me, it's like just being truthful and honest at all times over the long term has put me in really good stead. So I don't know, that's my version of it. And not trying to present the fully polished version. Like I'm happy to admit to people that, parenting and business life is ridiculously tough and I don't get the balance right and all this. I'm not trying to be out there trying to be a guru and presenting that I've got it all figured out. I think we're all just trying to make it work and we can learn from each other.
Yeah, incredible. Thank you so much for your insight. Guys, if you love this episode, share it with a friend, a colleague on your LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever that may be. And if you need help with software, Vokke and Jon is your guy.
Thanks, Mel.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.